I was going in there and adjusting things, and I clicked the button and I meant to not to click it. It was to make it so that people have to register. But then once I clicked it, it wouldn't let me undo it.
All right, stuff happens.
That's how it goes. So I'm going to quickly share the video that we just started on different channels.
It's a nice looking solar panel you got back there, Sam.
Vintage. Think. What is it? Oh, no. Yeah, it is sort of vintage.
What makes a solar panel vintage?
Old.
Well,
And I've been doing this for a long time, so
okay.
I have quite a collection of solar panels.
I can't hear Sam either.
Yeah, you're still pretty quiet.
I've got the mic up as loud as I can do it.
Do you have headphones that you can plug into the mic, or like into your phone or laptop?
Not easily. I've never tried these. Oh, that's what it's I don't.
Yeah, I have some headphones on now. Maybe that'll help.
I'm adjusting my mic so I can be heard a little better too. So,
inside your mouth.
How does that sound? Does that sound really bad? Okay.
I'm just too low.
Yeah. I mean, it's coming in clear, but it's go to the mic settings. So it's a select a microphone, or I guess test speaker and microphone. And I think there might be a way to adjust the input levels.
Here. Testing. Yeah, it is really low. Testing.
Okay, so if you go to the audio settings, there's a volume on the mic, and it might be set low. Yeah, and Martin brought up a good point too. Check to make sure what mic you're using, because you might be using a mic besides the one that you think you're using.
There's only one on the computer.
Okay.
The input level here is
Oh, Nisantahora, welcome. We're just seeing if we can up the mic levels a bit, and then we'll be getting on with it.
good. Can you hear me now? Testing.
It's
better.
It's better. So why don't we go with that, and we'll get going.
Testing.
We'll just all have to be respectful of when we're talking, so that way we can make sure everyone's being heard. Which is why we start off with welcome to Green Drinks. Today we're going to be talking about recycling clean technology, specifically solar PV. With all the excitement that's around solar, sometimes we forget nothing lasts forever, and there is a end use issue around these. All right. Just a quick overview of how this is going to kind of go. We're going to welcome everyone, do some quick introductions, announcements. Then we're going to have Sam Vanderhoof talk about recycled solar PV. Then we're going to talk about it for a bit. And since we're here, I figure since we have a small amount of people here, I was hoping we could go around and get everyone to introduce themselves. Of course, Thomas Hall from Clean Start. Soraya, why don't you go next?
Hi, my name is Soraya Jackson. I also work with Clean Start. I'm an associate there.
All right, Sam.
Can you hear me okay?
Still pretty quiet, but I can hear you.
Okay. I tried a bunch of things. It seems like I got worse throughout the day. So, Sam Vanderhoof, Recycle PV Solar. We're up in the Grass Valley, California area, and in Reno, Nevada.
All right, Daniel.
I'm Daniel Clark, inventor of a 3D solar panel in the Sacramento Rockland area.
All right, Martin.
Martin Mortensen, just interested in stuff.
Welcome. Nishant.
Hi, this is Nishant Arora. I work for an energy services company, basically into energy efficiency, but this field is very interesting to me, clean tech. Being an electrical engineer, I'm specifically interested in this field. Thank you.
Excellent. Just some quick announcements. The Clean Start's having its Clean Tech meetup later this month. It's on the grid and ratepayers. Also, Citizens Climate Lobby has their weekly intro calls every Wednesday. The ECOS board meeting is on November 24th. And also I put in here a link to the California's Department of Toxic Substances, their solar panel FAQ, because solar panels are considered a toxic waste still. Also, I encourage you to check out ECOS Sacramento 350, Clean Start, and Clean Tech Sacramento Facebook group for more discussion. And with that, I'm going to jump in and welcome Sam from Recycle PV Solar. Recycle PV Solar keeps PV out of the landfills by recycling and repurposing solar modules. This, like I said, is a huge issue. If you think about all the solar that's going up, or the fact that SMUD has a warehouse full of solar that it doesn't know what to do with because it's old solar. And with that, I'm going to follow you, Sam. Do you want me to go to the next slide?
Sounds great.
All right. Go ahead.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Sounds good. Now.
Okay. We keep changing things here. Hopefully that the volume is a little bit better than it was. So I've been in the solar business for a long time, over 40 years, mainly in the photovoltaic field, in manufacturing, installation, and now recycling. So next slide. Okay, here we go. We partnered with a company in Europe called PV Cycle, and PV Cycle is the largest in the world recycler of solar modules, starting off in Belgium, Europe, and now they're throughout Europe and working just the beginnings in Asia and Latin America. Next. So our mission, is pretty simple. It's to keep solar panels out of landfills, and that's our goal, and to provide all the services in order to do that. We started working on this process of collecting solar modules and looking into it, in a pretty serious way about 4 years ago. And about 2 years ago, we incorporated into what we have today and opened our first plant in Tucson, Arizona. And then recently, we're just underway on our new Reno plant, processing plant. And then we're looking at one more plant in the US as well. So we're real involved, not only the technology, how to do it. It's a very difficult process to recycle solar panels. It's not a simple process. There's very few machines that actually do that. So we've been working with our partner in Europe, and as well as the manufacturers in Europe that build these machines to bring those machines here. And we have some of the first machines have just landed here in the US. Jump to the next slide and I'll talk about some of the other small things here, but policy is a big part of what we're dealing with. Being able to drive the policies, bring the education level up to, one of the problem that we have of end of life of solar. So, one of the things we just celebrated just a few months ago was that California has now installed over 1 million solar roofs throughout California. And we were involved on our installation part of more than 9,000 systems in Sacramento alone. And those are, in partnership with SMUD. And a lot of those systems exist today, but we began installing those systems around 2001. And now a lot of those systems are aged and just beginning to be disassembled and reclaimed. So we're trying to work to make sure that those panels don't find themselves in the landfill. Next. Okay, so here's the basic problem. I'll go through a few problems and we'll talk about solutions. But end of life EOL panels it's increasing at a rapid rate based on when they were installed. And California was in the forefront of installing solar panels. Still today, about 65% of the nation's solar panels exist still today in California. In order to address this problem in a forward way, a national program really needs to be in place. So we work throughout the different states that are beginning to do legislation and try to bring in some visibility to it. And the goals are, we have a long ways to go. In Europe, our partners recycle about 95% of all the solar panels that come down at end of life. In the USA, we only do about 10%. So we have a long ways to go to catch up with what Europe has done. Every 90 seconds, a solar panel is installed. Solar panel system is installed in the US. That's 24 hours a day. It's a never-ending good problem to have, is that we're increasing our footprint of clean energy on a rapid basis and competing with coal and other forms of energy in a clean way. But we haven't addressed end of life. Next. Just again, to put it in perspective, so we're talking about 140,000 panels per day. And if you look on, as a recycling issue and metrics, is 7 million pounds a day are being installed. And that 7 million pounds will have an end of life at some point that has to be dealt with. And also to look at, because of the rapid growth of solar, it's increasing about 35 to 40% year over year. So, and because of its benign nature while it's producing power, it's getting to be the power source of choice pretty much worldwide. Next. Kind of a simple chart, between now and 2050, the global capacity of solar is increasing, and it's increasing in urban areas, but also in off-grid areas all throughout Asia and Africa. It is the easiest way to increase a power system. and also to isolate from power outages and things that a lot of developing countries face. Solar is a clean number one first choice, and that's why we're seeing the rapid uptake. But along with that rapid uptake is a declining cost, and that cost has dropped dramatically over the last 10 years. Next. This slide, Thomas, you have to kind of hit it each time as it come across, but current situation, just keep hitting them and I'll go through it. So in the US, we have about 65 gigawatts installed already. It's 5 million tons of solar panels. And it's growing, of course. A lot of us that manufactured these solar panels in the past, and selling them and using them, it was thought of that they lasted almost forever with very little maintenance. And that's how they were sold. And they're still sold that way today. And I hear either forever, or I definitely hear 30, 40, 50 years of service. And even though solar panels could do that, we're finding that it's really typically about 12 and a half years seems to be the typical lifespan of a normal installation. And for lots of reasons we can go through. Next. So some of the reasons that these systems are not really lasting, I say 25 years, but I mean, like I said, hearing up to 50 years is, remember solar panels, the PV type of panels really came from development of the space industry and satellite development. It was the choice of power for satellites because it's reliable. And so they were built under those exact standards. High quality and also very expensive. But in order to drive those panel prices down to be used more for terrestrial applications like we see today, things had to be changed. And and a lot of companies that built these panels are from Asian companies that sometimes cut corners to make them lower cost. So that's why we're seeing a lot of more failures today than we did, say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Recalls, we're seeing quite a few recalls from companies and good manufacturers that did their best job to manufacture the product in the proper way. But again, cutting corners a little bit, diodes are a big problem, and solar panels, they overheat and they break. And I don't know if you saw some of the Walmart fires. There's 450 Walmarts across the nations that have PV on them. And I think 7 to 8 of them caught on fire. And a lot of them were shut down and being retrofitted now. But the biggest issue we're seeing is weather caused issues. So next slide. So weather and ever increasing weather problems. Hail's getting larger with climate issues. Of course, we're seeing fires in California, hurricanes, tornadoes. All that is destroying vast amounts of solar, especially in the big utility parks that you see. We worked on a project last year that had 270,000 solar panels, and they were destroyed in less than 20 minutes by a tornado, I'm sorry. And that plant was scheduled to be 25 years in producing power. It only lasted 8 months. And when that happened, the tools weren't in place to be able to recover that panel, the recycling and repurposing that system, because it was supposed to last 25 years. And these are the issues we're facing today. Next slide. So here's just a snapshot of some of the causes that we're seeing. You can see weather is definitely a large one. Fire, like we're seeing in California now. all the defects and the manufacturing of the panel. These all account for some of the early life failures of solar panels. Not that they're not good these days. I mean, panels do last, they can last for a long time, but because of the rapid growth and because of sometimes questionable manufacturing, we're seeing a lot of early life failures. Next. So we're always asking, you know, what does it cost to recycle? Well, there's, you know, the typical costs, and it depends on where the panels are located, how many there are, you know, access to the site, all those kind of things, and what type, and maybe even brands sometimes of the solar panels. So $15 to $45 is the basic cost. And typically, the average cost really is around $18 for standard panels. To put that in perspective, though, in Europe, because of the policies they put in place for about 13 years now, the cost has gotten down to about 70 cents per panel to collect, transport, and process, a very reasonable price. And that's paid up front by manufacturers of the solar panels, and they make that program work. In the US, what we compete with is about that same price, about 75 cents per panel, that it costs to take these to landfills. So today, in the places that landfills do still accept solar panels, the problem is that for 75 cents, you can get rid of your solar panel. And that sometimes is a choice because the cost of recycling is so high. What we're proposing, and we're kind of trying to enlighten the solar industry and others to try to put together a program, much like a bottle bill, something like that, that would be about 1 cent per watt. That would happen. That would pay for a program today to be able to collect and manage solar panels based on the number of panels sold today, being able to reclaim the solar panels that are coming out of service. Next. So today we would call it a volunteer program in the US. In Europe, it's a mandatory program, and that's why we see it working so well. It's a, you know, it's a European mentality of social responsibility passed around to, you know, across all of Europe for all sorts of electronics and other consumer goods. That there is the guidance and the working with the industries to be able to make sure the end of life is handled correctly. So in the US, we have this volunteer program. So in order to do the volunteer program, to be able to add some value to that, to be able to, you know, for manufacturers of solar panels and distributors and installers and all that, to be able to start a program where there's some benefit to that, as for branding and for customer satisfaction and being able to truly process panels at the end of life and recognize the issue and jump into and make it better. That's what we're seeing is the next step for the US. Next. So same as, you know, we're seeing with, you know, other products in the US. And most states have some kind of, you know, battery take back program, car tires, TVs, you know, all the consumer products that we have today that have been pretty much, you know, the policy in those states charge some up front, you know, call it a tax or whatever. I think TVs now in California are about $11 per TV. But cans and bottles have the 5 cent to 10 cent, you know, fee on those bottles, and car tires. We don't even think about it anymore. We just pay that price at the time of checkout, and that pays for all the downstream collection, recycling. All that is paid for by and large. The recycling programs throughout the U.S. definitely has some challenges, but the car battery industry was one of the better examples of being able to charge that $15 core charge up front for car batteries. And they started that about 10 to 12 years ago. That accounts for 98% of, so pretty much all car batteries are now recycled throughout the US, because it wasn't a policy enacted by the US. It was actually the battery industry came together and co-opt this program to a high core charge to make sure that they got batteries back. So they had more raw materials, easier than mining, but also because less toxic, and they wanted to mitigate all their liability. So it was a good win-win for everyone. Solar panels have no program. So I think until we get a program state by state or across the US, it's still a volunteer program, which makes it grow really slow, which makes it more expensive. Next. You guys know where this is from? This photograph? Anybody have any idea? Look familiar? Maybe not from this side, but this is the site of the Rancho Seco nuclear power plant with the solar arrays in the front. And this solar array was one of the largest in the world for a long, long time, many, many years, I think for probably 15 or more years. It was decommissioned about 5 years ago. And sad to say, we believe that most of them went to landfill because it was the easiest path. And that's kind of where we started with our recycling business. We saw this and we thought this shouldn't happen. So that's when we began to really look into the problem and the issues and the solutions of how to solve keeping panels out of landfills. Next. This is a quick chart by Arena. It's a part of NRail that has put together a really nice report on end of life. It's almost 5 years old now, the report, so it's really dated. Things have really changed. If you see this little pink line on here, about the year 2030 to 2035, we're still working on the numbers, but that's about the time in that year that we're going to be decommissioning more solar panels than we're going to be installing. And that's only 10 years from now. So it's not that far from now that we really need to look at having really good recycling and processing and reuse programs in place in order to meet that demand, which is 10 years away. Next. There's some pictures coming up. So a lot of big power plants throughout the US and California especially, and a lot of them are being decommissioned because, like I said before, about 12 and a half years we're seeing these things come down. So there's ways of dealing with it. Recycling is one of the paths to deal with these panels. The more difficult places, if you see these little photos on the left, I've been to these places. I've been to Nigeria, I've been to places in Africa and Latin America that recycle in some ways. You call it recycling, not really. It's taking wastes from Europe and the US and doing awful ways of stripping up the metals and in very unclean ways, causing pollution, just ravaging the landscape. And we're trying to keep that from happening. We're trying to deal with our waste here in the US and properly handle it. And also reuse. If you see the photos on the right, we work a lot in Africa and Latin America and Haiti, Belize, Mexico, providing used solar panels. And here also in the US and Native American reservations, being able to reuse panels that came off of these plants. So they definitely have a secondary life. Next. Just a quick one. You can, Roger or Thomas, you could do the next one. Just show you some horrible things that we see in the field. This was an experimental project, a floating planet project. The wind came up and boom, it was gone. It's hard to designed for every problem out there. So one of the things to look at with what we're trying to do is we've got valuable materials in these solar panels. It is really, really difficult to get out, and different solar panels have different technologies, but being able to mine those materials out in a efficient way and reusing those materials makes a lot of sense. In order to do it the proper way, we have to have volume. And that's kind of the chicken and egg issue in the US right now. We've got to get the volume up, probably by policy, to be able to put in place the measures to be able to efficiently and cost effectively mine these materials. Next. So here's an optimistic kind of number of the components that we pull out. So glass has a fairly low resale value, but it does have two things against it. It has a really expensive processing cost. It also has a very high shipping cost. So these prices are per ton. If you look at the glass prices of $80 to $100 a ton, well, if we try to ship it more than about 1,000 miles, it costs about $250 to ship it. So we have to be very careful about what we do with this glass. We're trying to look at our plants being close to recycling places that use glass or glass manufacturing. We're working with companies that make fiberglass insulation for homes that can reuse that glass. So being able to have a downstream partner is really important. Next. So what we do is, we collect these solar panels and we put them into 3 different bins. We put them into a bin that if they're in good shape and we test them and everything physically looks good, the panels are undamaged. They have a small resale, but a resale value or a donation value being put right back into service. The next thing, which is even a little more difficult to do, is to refurbish those, to take those panels, do the work that they need to have done to make them usable again and safe, and then use them mainly in off-grid applications worldwide. And then the third bin is recycle everything else that's left over. So all the salvageable materials we can pull out of it. Next. This is one of our mottos: don't let solar go to waste. We try to reuse what we can and then recycle everything else. Next. So what we do is pretty high tech, but everything that we need exists today. It's just the will to make it happen. And it's bringing awareness to the problem that I helped create, and also to fix that problem. There's a lot of research. NREL, UL is helping. A lot of manufacturers are helping. So that technology we've been developing as well in Europe and with our partners. Next. So PV Cycle has an existing program that works. The collection program works, but again, it's mandated in Europe. So it had to work in some fashion, and they've been, playing with it and making adjustments over the last 13 years to make it work. But today it works, and it shows that for 90 cents a solar panel costs, it works, and that's paid by the manufacturer. So end users don't even see that cost. It's just rolled into the cost of the product. Next. So these are some of the machines that exist today, and we've bought 2 of the smaller machines, the first part of these machines. We're also working on a mobile machine that we can actually take it out to the large plants and be able to do some work at the plants themselves. So that's what we're developing right now. Next. So that's what we do, guys. There's not a lot of us out there trying to do this. Because we've been in the business so long, I think that's why we understand the program and the challenges in doing that. And the more we looked into it, the more we saw it was a bigger problem than we ever thought. So now we're trying to make a difference and trying to clean up some of the messes that we made over the last 40 years. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much. First, I want to thank you for sharing all that information with us. I'm going to kind of leave it on this page, and we're going to just kind of go into questions. Unpinned video. Okay. And the first kind of question I had is, you're talking about basically the end of life of solar as a lot of wind damage, environmental damage. And you said it was claims. Was that insurance claims on it, or were they other claims? Or was it?
It's a good question. It depends if it's residential or commercial.
Okay.
Most systems have some kind of insurance based on weather related, but not all. So again, it's usually an afterthought. If it's weather damage or something, is it covered under the insurance policy? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. The project we worked on in Texas, it was a big surprise. The insurance company underwrote it, and they thought, oh, it's going to last 30 years. They were counting on that. When it only lasted 8 months, and they ended up paying out $70 million to the owners of the solar system to get it up and running again. Big surprise. So
Okay. Then
as there's more of these larger claims, I think we'll see the changes in the insurance policies.
so I have one quick question follow up on that is, do you see insurance companies actually going and saying that they want to have some sort of end of life planning on it? Because I'd imagine once you put a solar or claim on it, then it's the solar or the insurance company's job to get rid of the waste, right? Or do you see them at all interested in?
What was the last part? I'm sorry.
So are insurance companies at all interested in end of life solar to reduce the cost of them paying out claims?
Absolutely, yeah. We're just beginning discussions with different insurance companies that underwrite to see how we can work together, and we're even interested in offering insurance to the insurance companies. It's a kind of interesting way that we would take more of the risk than the insurance companies.
We have a question
I
from.
think our modeling is better.
Yeah. A question from Martin. Where would be the best place to find low cost repurposed panels? Do you recycle and repurpose the inverters too?
Say the last part. I'm sorry.
Do you recycle / repurpose the inverters also?
Kind of a trick question. It's a different company. So we have two companies, and the other company we have focuses on inverters. So we have a long history of solar inverters within the U.S. I started two companies. One company, which was Trace Engineering, which today is Xantrex Schneider. So it's one of the largest companies in the world. So that was one of our first companies. Our second company was SMA America, which is one of the largest solar inverter companies in the world, headquartered in Germany, but also has a branch here in Rockland, California.
Okay. All right.
So we do actually, and we also do a lot of inverter repairs. It's a big part of what our other business is.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you kind of highlighted at the beginning was, I guess, the circular economy, planning for end of life at the beginning of life of products. What groups do you see that are supporting the circular economy when it comes to PV recycling? I know you have PV Cycle here, but what groups should we go and say, hey, you should be really excited about this, or how do I get involved?
In the U.S., it's a little different. In the U.S., there's really only a couple companies, and one of those is a manufacturer, First Solar, and they have their own internal program for recycling and capturing precious metals and components from their solar panels that they manufacture. So they only do their own panels. A couple other companies do a decent job of making sure end of life happens, but there's only about 3 companies in the U.S. the rest of the company is pretty much in denial, because it is an issue if you recognize that there is an end of life to solar, and it may be shorter than we say at the time of sales. It's a lot of denial. So to admit that sometimes is a difficult discussion to have when you're trying to sell a product and you're trying to amortize it over 30 plus years, and you begin to admit in your sales process that maybe it's only 12 and a half years, it makes it more expensive. So it's an issue we have to deal with. And really, in order to bring in policy and get the cost of recycling and repurposing down, that'll solve the problem.
Are there any grassroots groups that you think are doing a good job of pushing policy?
There's quite a few. I mean, a lot of, it's interesting that the solar industry has, mixed alliances for doing it. So sometimes it's more difficult within that. But some of the companies that deal with waste and waste management and recycling are now beginning to step up and recognize the issue, and they're already used to those kind of policies with car tires and batteries and mattresses and all the other things that do have a limited end of life, and beginning to look at how to address policies for that. So we're just starting to see that, and it's usually state by state. We're not seeing a national program, but New York, New Jersey, Arizona, of course, Washington, North Carolina, Minnesota, all those states are working hard on policy right now.
Okay. Nishant has a question. Does solar PV have enough rare earth minerals that can be extracted, hoping that recycling can become more financially attractive? Today, apart from glass and metals, what are the higher end products that come out of the recycling process?
Like I was saying before, glass is the 65 to 70% of the material. It's glass, so that's it's a difficult material to pull away cleanly. If you can't pull the glass away in a clean way, it has no value at all. But if you can clean it, then it has a place for remarketing into other feedstock. So that's important if you can do that, and that's what makes the machines expensive. Silicon has a value, so being able to pull that out, it does have some value if you can separate it again clean enough. The whole issue is getting it clean, and that's why the technologies in the U.S. don't exist. That's why we're importing some of these new technologies, was because they exist in Europe. The holy grail is silver, and the U.S. the solar industry uses about 10% of the world's silver, and it's being put into solar panels used every day. So it makes sense to pull that out rather than putting it in landfills, because it could be reused. But the silver is difficult to get out, number one. And number two, it is being used less and less in the newer panels. So if we recycled a panel that was built today versus a panel 10 years ago, the panel 10 years ago has a lot more silver in it. So being able to know what panels have the best amount of silver and what the value is part of our ongoing research.
Daniel, you have a question?
Yeah, in regards to the solar glass, so let's say we thought that maybe part of our business model would be a good way to utilize your glass. So let's say we theoretically opened a manufacturing facility that was close to yours. Are you saying that you guys are able to process the glass pure enough so we could reuse it in our solar modules?
Yeah, for sure. There's actually one partner we're working with right now. They make solar glass, and they're working with us to be able to take our glass in a pure enough state to be able to make solar glass again.
That's interesting, because we have a UV curable binder we use, and we can actually micro mold our micro 3D substrates in glass. So that might be a good business model for us to think about. And also, I saw an article today about folks in Korea recycling the silicon into like nanoparticles, and they were having a high success. So do you guys recycle the silicon too, and can it be reused?
We're actually just looking at that right now, being able to use it in battery technology, so as a high value, and also in construction industry. So those are the things we're spending a lot of time on. Actually, we're working on a grant right now. We're spending our midnight hours on a grant to be able to identify the materials and the downstream part of those materials, and look at the higher value for those materials.
Well, hats off to you
A lot of time spent into that.
for doing this. It's a great industry you're in. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question or comment question from Martin. Can we get enough material to material to justify the recycling process? And if not, would we be better off just to landfill? And I'm going to tag something kind of onto that, asking if you could comment on the waste rules around solar, because I think that becomes somewhat relevant.
Wow, that's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So California, number one. So California recognizes when solar panels come down off a roof or off a project and they're not going to be reused, today they're considered at that moment hazardous waste and have to be handled under all the hazardous waste conditions. So it's pretty strict. Starting January 1st, the DTSC is changing the status of solar panels to be universal waste. And under universal waste, some of the biggest things we see is that the transportation and handling of the solar panels will be a little more streamlined, but that's about the only thing. So solar panels will still be considered hazardous waste, but under the universal waste guidelines. So it's still a very costly process.
And then I guess the other part of the question, or the one that Martin would ask, is since it sounds like it costs a lot to recycle them and there's not a whole lot of material, why is this better than just landfilling them? Is that a good summary, Martin, of what you're asking? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, landfilling is a lot cheaper. So, I mean, we've even talked about, I mean, as materials become more and more valuable, like silver and things like that, you could even, rather than taking solar panels and landfilling them, and then in 15 years go back and dig up the landfills to reclaim the silver, that's an expensive process. Be better to either do it now, or to at least stash the solar panels in a way that you could come back and remine those solar panels, because it's somewhat easier to do that than it is to open up a silver mine.
Mining
Or a
is a
silicon mine, or whatever. But the problem is we made solar panels so well. I spent a lot of time, a lot of years developing the technology for manufacturing panels, that we try to make them so they last for a long time. That's the idea, in rough conditions, and high temperature deserts, and very cold conditions. In order to do that, the thought was really never, how do we take these apart? So we made them to last, and the pulling them apart is a difficult thing. So that technology, the labor, the time, and the transportation adds to that cost.
okay.
So in Europe, just to note what Europe is doing, Europe spends a lot more time on looking at the whole circular economy, and how to manufacture panels so they do come apart easier and can be recycled easier, and that some of the materials can more easily be recycled or reused for value.
And one thing that I'd kind of also want to add on there is when we look at distributed power, and kind of distributed just the entire distributed economy around the world, setting up solar in remote regions to give them access to power, then their ability to handle end of life of solar needs to be considered too. So if we're like, okay, we'll just landfill it. Well, if you're looking at, let's say Indonesia or Malaysia, where you have a lot of distributed systems and you're hopefully replacing a lot of coal fire or gas plants with solar or tidal or something efficient, if they're replaced with solar, at the end of it, They have waste problems then too in those nations, and just saying, okay, we're going to landfill all of it. Maybe it might work for for more larger places like the United States, but finding good solutions for all of the world needs to be kind of considered too. So there's definitely an economic trade-off there. I'd want to put in that, just because maybe landfilling it makes duplicate or would really want to duplicate around the world, you'd want to take into life consideration. You'd want to take into consideration into life.
Yeah. I mean, not to forget that solar panels do have toxic materials built into them, and it depends on the technology. So just because you landfill it, and if you do it in a standard non-captured landfill, leaching of lead and chromium and arsenic and a bunch of other materials into the landfill and into the groundwater is not a good idea. And properly handling those panels can mitigate that. But I mean, the reason it costs so much, I mean, if we're talking about, again, we're pushing for a national program to subsidize and standardize the processing in the US. If that happens in the US like it does in Europe, it's cheaper than landfill. So that makes sense, but you've got to get the volume up in order to make that happen.
I was going to quickly highlight slide. Today it costs $15 to $45 to process a solar panel in the US. Europe, it is 70 cents. So those are some serious economies of scale.
Yep. And last year in Europe, it was 90 cents, just to show you. They dropped it 20 cents a panel this year. So next year it could be less.
All right. So I see, Dan,
landfill costs are somewhere between 75 cents and $1 per panel today across the U.S. In places you can do it.
So I see, Dan, we have a question about selling fused silica glass for $80 a ton recycled.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I might have missed it, but how much did you say you can sell your solar grade glass for remanufacturing of panels?
We're talking about not float glass. We're talking about the captured glass, granulated glass.
Yeah, something we can reuse.
$50 to $80 a ton.
Wow, and so like glass has gone up 70% for manufacturers this year. If you compared that to someone just selling regular glass off the market, that's quite a lot cheaper, isn't it?
Yeah, it is cheaper, but it's still granular. You've got to do something with it. You've got to, either mix it or, and remember the glass that we have typically is a low iron glass. It's a little bit different. So sometimes has to be mixed if it's not going to be used for solar, mixed with other glass.
Because we have a process where we need granular glass and we mix it with a binder that's UV curable. And so when you mix it with the binder, we just put it in a micro mold and then we freeze it with dry ice and we pop it out of the micro mold and then cook it, and it solidifies as a polymer, and then we throw it in the sinter oven. So there might be some future synergies with utilizing
how
that.
How thick is that glass, but when you're done?
It's about 1 millimeter tall.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's a micro 3D structure, so it's something new that probably people haven't seen, but it could have a use for us. So I have your email in here. I'll keep in touch.
That'd be great.
All right, and I'm going to put your email and contact in there. Does anyone else have additional questions? Oh, sorry, did everyone just jump off all of a sudden, or no, it's just my screen. Any additional questions? All right. So again, I want to thank Sam for joining us. 1 second. Okay. So thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. I want to encourage everyone to connect with SAC 350, ECOS, and Clean Start. And I'm actually looking forward to possibly inviting Sam back to one of the clean tech meetups in the future when we talk more about recycling. So hopefully it was a good experience. Yeah. Soraya?
There's another question in the chat.
Oh, thank you. With the new leadership, if there was a federal policy on mandatory solar PV recycling, what policy changes do you hope could be put in place? Your dream scenario, some.
Some. I mean, it just, I just gave you guys a quick snapshot. The problem is huge. I mean, if you're not in the solar business, you maybe don't get this number, but 1 gigawatt is a lot of solar panels. A gigawatt. A gigawatt's being decommissioned this year in 2020. It's a hell of a lot of solar panels. And where are they going to go? And most of them are not recycled. A lot of them, from what we can tell, and there's a kind of underground network of solar panels leaving our country to some other countries, put it that way, because of the high cost here and the regulations that aren't being really enforced. So most of the wasted solar panels are being shipped to Mexico, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Latin America, or even Africa. And then that ends up in their waste stream. And that has to stop. So some of the policies to, contain, and it's not just PV. I don't want to just say it's this commodity. It's all electronics and a lot of other consumables in the U.S. The recycling industry is relied on usually China or developing nations to send their scrap to those nations, and those nations are struggling now because they're overwhelmed by what they get and the value of what they're getting and the environmental causes it's causing in those other countries. So for policies, I'd like to see us handle our own waste we generate.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Nishant. Thank you, Sarai, for helping me. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Daniel, for joining us, and everyone for coming. So I'm going to go ahead and start ending things now.